The Galactic Conclave was an austere, imposing assembly of the most powerful leaders in the known universe. They hailed from civilizations with technology so advanced, they could reduce planets to dust without even setting foot on them. Today, however, the Conclave's sprawling hall wasn't resonating with the usual gravitas of high-stakes diplomacy or interplanetary defense strategy. Instead, a current of amused arrogance threaded through the gathering, expressed in flickering mandibles, swishing tails, and subtle chittering hums. The source of their amusement stood before them, restrained yet dignified. Sergeant Liam Carter, a special air service operative from Earth, was an oddity here, a lone human surrounded by alien creatures with skin that glittered like polished steel or eyes that glowed with unnatural, predatory light. Though he held himself with a steely composure, the subtle movements of his fingers betrayed a restless energy, a readiness born of years of high-intensity training. The Conclave's warriors didn't notice, nor would they have understood the significance if they had. To them, Earth's representative was simply a specimen, another curiosity from a world deemed quaint and primitive. One of the Conclave leaders, Grand Marshal Corvier, a towering creature with skin like burnished obsidian and limbs that ended in razor-sharp talons, addressed Carter with barely concealed derision. "We have heard much of Earth's warriors," Corvier intoned, his voice deep and metallic. "Your planet, though young, has earned a place in our alliance. And yet, we wonder if this is due to actual strength or mere good fortune." A ripple of laughter pulsed through the hall, but Carter's expression remained stoic. Inside, though, he was assessing, observing the way each alien reacted, cataloging weaknesses, imagining tactical possibilities. Years of training had honed his senses, turning every breath, every sidelong glance into valuable data. He'd been briefed on alien species before, but seeing them in the flesh, if that was the right word, was a stark reminder of how truly foreign these beings were. Unperturbed by the crowd's mockery, Carter took a slow breath, hiding his reaction beneath an impassive mask. His silence, however, seemed to goad Corvier further. "Tell me, Earthling," the Marshal continued, leaning down as if to study a rare insect, "do you understand why we summoned you here today? Or do such things elude your kind?" Carter met Corvier's penetrating stare with a calm, level gaze. "I was told I'm here to represent Earth's military capabilities," he replied, his voice steady, deliberate. "To be tested in whatever trial you deem fit." Corvier's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile, had his mouth not been lined with rows of needle-sharp teeth. A trial indeed. A demonstration, perhaps, but make no mistake, Earthling, this is not for your benefit. It is for ours. Carter understood well enough. The Conclave had arranged this spectacle to affirm their own dominance, to flaunt the supposed inferiority of Earth's defenders. They were taking this opportunity to show how soft humanity was, parading him as an example of what they saw as a species unprepared for the brutal calculus of galactic warfare. As the Conclave leaders deliberated over details of the trial, Carter allowed himself a moment to observe his surroundings. The arena itself was colossal, carved from dark stone and metal that radiated an eerie luminescence. Battle marks marred the walls, scars from countless trials, each one a silent testament to warriors who had come before, most of whom likely hadn't walked out. A young diplomat from Earth had briefed Carter prior to his arrival, emphasizing the importance of this encounter for humanity's position in the galaxy. Yet no amount of diplomatic language could hide the truth. Earth was being judged. Its fate in the Alliance, its standing among these titanic civilizations, depended entirely on Carter's performance here. His survival, and his victory, would be the foundation of Earth's reputation. One of the younger aliens in the crowd, a tall, wiry creature with scales that shimmered a deep purple, smirked and leaned toward another, speaking just loud enough for Carter to hear. "Look at him. They still use projectile-based weapons on Earth. Primitive. Surely he'll break before the first charge." The jab didn't faze Carter. He was no stranger to taunts or miscalculations about his strength. Instead, He focused, centering himself, recalling the grueling SAS training that had pushed him past every conceivable physical and mental limit. He'd faced impossible odds before, enemies who had outgunned and outnumbered him. Yet he'd always emerged with victory, if only because defeat had never been an option. A resonant chime echoed through the chamber, signaling the beginning of the trial. Corvier's eyes gleamed as he gestured toward a platform across the arena. A warrior stepped forward, towering and armored, his physique suggesting a being built for war. Thick muscles coiled under chitinous plating, and energy weapons hummed on either side of his elongated arms. The warrior's eyes fixed on Carter, gleaming with something between contempt and eager anticipation. "Your opponent," Corvier announced with satisfaction, "is one of our finest recruits. Even among our kind, his strength is unparalleled. He will offer you the honor of combat. Or mercy, should you request it." The crowd murmured with laughter at the last remark, but Carter remained impassive. He let his gaze drift over the warrior's form, studying the alien's stance, the way he carried his weapons, the subtle tells that hinted at his strengths and his vulnerabilities. He noticed the slight favoring of one leg, the slight over-reliance on his armor to absorb damage. Carter had seen this overconfidence before in well-trained but untested soldiers. "Thank you for the honor," Carter replied with the barest hint of a smile, his voice resonating through the chamber. He could see the flicker of confusion ripple through the crowd, as if they hadn't expected him to be so composed. "I'll do my best to return it in kind." The Grand Marshal's gaze narrowed. He could sense something in Carter, a subtle defiance, a willingness to engage fully, even in the face of an opponent larger, stronger, and, by all appearances, indestructible. Yet Carter's calmness unsettled him. Corvier had expected fear, or at least resignation, but not this quiet, unwavering resolve. As Carter moved toward the center of the arena, the whispers in the crowd grew quieter, a ripple of curiosity overtaking the dismissive sneers. This earthling, this soft human, walked as if he owned the ground beneath him, his steps unhurried, his focus unbroken. The last sounds before the trial began were the whispers of onlookers as they struggled to reconcile their perceptions with the man before them. Corvier gave the signal, and Carter prepared to engage, his body ready, his mind sharpened to a singular purpose. And in that moment the conclave began to doubt. The silence was thunderous as the trial began, a charged, expectant hush that enveloped the arena. Sergeant Liam Carter let it wash over him, his senses attuning to the alien landscape, cataloging every possible hazard and advantage. His opponent, a towering, armored behemoth with sapphire-hued scales and muscular limbs, moved with a casual, predatory grace, confident in his size and alien strength. The alien's glowing eyes narrowed on Carter, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. This earthling was nothing more than prey to him, a challenge that would provide, at best, a few moments of amusement. Carter had faced creatures far deadlier than this in the brutal, close-quarters conflicts he'd known on Earth. But he also knew better than to underestimate an opponent, especially one with physical advantages so pronounced. He adjusted his grip on his standard-issue SAS combat knife, a reliable tool he'd chosen over the high-tech weaponry offered to him by the Conclave. To the Galactic audience, this decision had seemed quaint, almost laughable, but Carter understood that speed, precision, and control often mattered more than raw power. The alien warrior, sensing Carter's readiness, emitted a low growl that reverberated through the arena. His first strike was as predictable as it was overwhelming, a sweeping, clawed arm that could have cleaved through armor and bone alike. But Carter had read the telegraphing tension in his opponent's shoulders. He sidestepped with the fluidity of a dancer, letting the blow pass him by a breath's width. The crowd murmured in surprise. Most of them had expected the earthling to be flattened in the opening seconds. But Carter remained calm, focused. He needed the alien to overcommit, to believe that his brute strength alone would secure him victory. If the alien kept attacking with unrestrained force, Carter knew he could exploit that reckless confidence. As expected, the alien warrior's strikes grew faster, wilder. His next attack came with a vicious snarl, a downward slash aimed to split Carter in two. Carter evaded once more, his body twisting just out of reach, the razor edge of the alien's claws barely grazing his shoulder. Pain flared along his skin, but he used the moment to roll forward, sliding past the alien's side, close enough to deliver a brutal jab to a soft joint in the creature's armor. His knife punctured flesh with a satisfying crunch. The alien roared, staggering back, disbelief flickering in his expression. To most of the crowd, it seemed like an anomaly, a single lucky strike. But to those with a keener eye, it was evident that Carter had found a weakness and exploited it with ruthless efficiency. Blood, a viscous, iridescent substance that shimmered like liquid metal, trickled from the wound, and the alien warrior's shock quickly morphed into rage. With a furious bellow, he activated a shimmering energy shield embedded within his gauntlet, surrounding himself in a barrier that crackled with deadly plasma. Carter took a half-step back, assessing. His opponent was faster now, the shield enhancing his reach and effectively blocking any direct strike. Carter's mind raced, scanning for an alternative. He couldn't hope to penetrate that shield with his knife alone, and every second the alien spent encased in it meant his confidence was returning. But Carter noticed something: the shield wasn't uniform. Every few seconds it flickered, a faint distortion that hinted at the energy cells fueling it. They weren't designed for prolonged combat, meaning the shield's power was limited. The alien lunged again, shield blazing, intending to force Carter into submission with relentless, close-range attacks. Carter sidestepped and kept a careful distance, counting the rhythm of each flicker in the shield. He just needed to time it perfectly. 5 more strikes. The alien was slowing, his breathing labored, the shield's energy cells beginning to dim. At the next attack, Carter feigned a stumble, deliberately letting his balance falter. The alien, sensing an opening, struck with all his might. Carter twisted at the last second, sidestepping the blow and slipping within the shield's range just as it flickered, plunging his knife into a gap in the alien's armor. The alien's bellow of pain reverberated through the hall as Carter drove the blade in deeper, leveraging his weight to twist it. His opponent fell to one knee, his shield finally dissipating in a surge of failing energy. Carter stepped back, chest heaving, as the alien warrior struggled to regain his footing, his pride more wounded than his body. Yet the fight wasn't over. With a pained snarl, the alien pushed himself upright, clutching his wounded side, fury burning in his gaze. Carter could see the desperation there. His opponent's sense of superiority was shattered, replaced by the raw survival instincts of a cornered beast. The alien threw his last weapon, a spiked gauntlet, at Carter, hoping to catch him off guard. Carter ducked and lunged forward, closing the gap. In one fluid motion, he grappled with the alien, using his own momentum against him. He twisted, driving his elbow into the alien's throat, exploiting the weaknesses in his opponent's anatomy he'd identified from the beginning. The alien staggered, clutching at his throat, and fell backward, his massive body hitting the ground with a resounding crash. For a moment, the arena was silent, save for Carter's ragged breathing. The conclave had been prepared for a spectacle, a quick, brutal takedown of the soft human. But the sight of Carter standing over their fallen warrior, bloodied yet unbowed, defied every assumption they'd clung to. Corvier, who had remained silent through the fight, now rose slowly, his expression unreadable. His gaze shifted from Carter to the fallen warrior, then back again. The air was thick with disbelief, the crowd murmuring as they processed what they'd just witnessed. Carter wiped his blade on his sleeve, his expression impassive. He knew better than to bask in victory. There would be more tests, more opponents. But he'd made his point. Earth was not to be dismissed or underestimated. He met Corvier's gaze with a steady, unflinching look, a silent challenge resting in his eyes. As Corvier opened his mouth to speak, the crowd fell silent once more, anticipation crackling in the air. Carter braced himself, knowing that whatever came next, his work here was far from over. A heavy silence blanketed the arena. Sergeant Liam Carter stood in its center, his breathing steadying, his gaze unwavering as he wiped his blade and slid it back into its sheath. The fallen alien warrior lay motionless, his massive form a testament to his strength, yet ultimately no match for the earthling before him. Around the arena, thousands of alien eyes fixed on Carter, once dismissive but now widened with newfound regard, and, for some, a hint of fear. High above, Grand Marshal Corvier rose from his seat, his obsidian gaze settling on Carter. A lifetime of commanding armies across galaxies had trained Corvier to read warriors, to assess their strength, both obvious and hidden. And now, despite his initial contempt for this human, he saw a rare quality in Carter, something he hadn't expected to find in a being from Earth. Still, Corvier's pride bristled against the sting of being proven wrong. Carter felt the marshal's stare but met it with calm defiance, the tension between them taut and unspoken. Every instinct within him told him to stay guarded. The alien leader was unpredictable, and this victory might be short-lived. But Carter allowed himself a slight satisfaction. He hadn't just survived the trial, he'd shattered their prejudices about Earth's warriors. After what felt like an eternity, Corvier's deep, resonant voice broke the silence. "It seems we have underestimated you, Earthling." Murmurs of agreement and reluctant nods rippled through the conclave. Carter inclined his head in a small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than gratitude. Corvier's words were as close to praise as he was likely to receive, and Carter wasn't one for false humility. One of the council members, a lean, reptilian figure with scales that glimmered a venomous green, leaned forward, his eyes slitted with curiosity. "Tell us, Earthling," he hissed, "are all of your warriors like you? Or are you an exception?" Carter took a moment to consider his answer. He knew that this moment carried more weight than his own reputation. It represented Earth itself, and how the conclave would view its military potential in the years to come. "On Earth, we have many warriors," he replied, his voice steady and clear. "Some specialize in tactics, others in resilience. I may be trained to fight alone, but my strength is a reflection of what our people are capable of when we work together." The response seemed to intrigue them, but Carter could see a flicker of calculation in Corvier's eyes. This trial had, without a doubt, shown the conclave that Earth's warriors possessed a skill they hadn't anticipated. But it also meant Earth could no longer be ignored as a passive member of the Alliance. The conclave would now see Earth as either a potential ally or a threat. Corvier folded his arms, his gaze piercing. "You say you fought alone. That your strength reflects your people's." He paused, the weight of his words sinking into the room. "Yet you fought in a manner we did not expect, with cunning and adaptability. Such traits are rare, even among our finest." A faint ripple of agreement traveled through the council, and Carter noted several pairs of eyes narrowing, re-evaluating him, perhaps even Earth itself. The council's attitude had transformed, from smug condescension to a wary, almost respectful interest. And though Carter knew he had achieved what he'd come to do, he felt a strange sensation, the realization that he was leaving an imprint on these beings, one that could shape Earth's destiny in this vast, competitive galaxy. Seeing the shift, Corvier leaned forward, lowering his voice but keeping it audible to all. "Perhaps there is a future where Earth and the conclave share knowledge, exchange strategies. Your kind could benefit from our technology, as we could learn from your unique approach." Carter studied the Grand Marshal's face, noting the cautious look behind his proposal. It wasn't an invitation born of goodwill. It was a tactical choice, a way for the conclave to keep Earth close, perhaps to control it under the guise of cooperation. Carter knew this was another test, and one he needed to approach with the same caution as his fight. He nodded slowly. An alliance built on mutual respect could be of value. But respect must go both ways. His voice remained calm, yet his tone carried a quiet strength, making it clear that Earth would not be subservient, nor would it accept condescension. Carter sensed the subtle shift in the energy of the room, his words challenging the council to acknowledge Earth as an equal. Corvier's gaze sharpened. For a brief moment, a dangerous silence lingered, but then a slow, approving smile crossed his face, one that exposed his needle-like teeth in a rare, genuine display. "Well spoken, Sergeant Carter," he said. His tone weighted with an unusual respect. "Perhaps your people have earned that consideration." The finality in Corvier's words seemed to settle the matter, and a ripple of reluctant admiration filled the arena. The alien warriors, council members, and diplomats who had once laughed at the thought of an earthling trial now observed him with a mixture of respect and wary regard. Carter inclined his head again, recognizing the shift without betraying any triumph. His mission had been to prove Earth's strength and secure its standing, and he'd done it without fanfare, without boasting, only action and conviction. He knew, however, that his work wasn't truly over. This alliance, this precarious balance of mutual respect, would require vigilance and strength from Earth, a continued demonstration that humans could stand tall among the stars. As he turned to leave, Corvier's voice stopped him once more. "Remember, Sergeant, that we do not offer respect lightly. But today you have earned it." There was a pause, a gleam of amusement or admiration in the alien's dark eyes. "Perhaps, one day, I may have the honor of learning from your kind directly." Carter nodded, a trace of a smile playing at the edges of his mouth. "Perhaps, Grand Marshal." He gave a parting glance to the conclave, his expression resolute, leaving them with a sense of Earth's quiet, determined strength. As he walked from the arena, the weight of his victory settled within him. He'd carried Earth's honor through trial and test, through alien eyes that now saw Earth's warriors as something other than soft. There was a long road ahead, new alliances to be forged and new challenges to face. But Carter had set a precedent today, one that would echo across stars, leaving an indelible mark on Earth's place in the universe. And in the shadows of the arena, amid the conclave's awed silence, Carter could feel that Earth had finally gained what it had come here for, a foothold of respect in a galaxy that now knew its strength.
The wind didn't howl. It groaned, dragged, and gnawed, like an old soul angry it had been forgotten. It swept down the mesa in ragged fists, tugging at cloth and skin, stripping breath from the lungs of the woman who pushed through it. Her steps weren't fast, but they didn't stop. Not even when her boots sank ankle-deep into snow that had no right falling this late in spring. Not even when her littlest child whimpered against her back. She had a child on her back, another holding each hand, and no destination beyond away. Away from fists. Away from hunger. Away from the man whose boots she'd still hear stomping in her sleep. 3 days ago she'd left behind everything she owned. Except the children. Her lips were cracked, her cheeks swollen beneath a scarf. She didn't wince when the wind slapped it again. Her eyes, once green like new corn, had settled into a dull amber. The kind you find in things buried too long. "Ma," the boy on her left said, voice trembling, "I can't feel my toes." She didn't answer. Couldn't lie and say it'd be all right. But she squeezed his hand tighter. Her own fingers were blistered raw beneath the mitts. And still she walked. The land had turned white, broken only by the shape ahead. A low dwelling. Round. Smoke curling upward like a prayer. A hogan. She didn't know the name for it. Just that it meant warmth. Shelter. She had no map, only a rumor that there was a man out here who didn't like town folk, didn't talk much, and never turned anyone away who knocked without a gun. She knocked. No answer. The children didn't cry. They just looked at her, silently, as if waiting to see what she would become now. Brave? Broken? She knocked again. This time softer. The door creaked open slowly. No rush, no fear. Just steady hinges groaning like they'd done it 100 times. And then he appeared. Not tall by legend standards, but tall enough to fill the frame. Broad shoulders beneath a weathered blanket, dark eyes sunk into high cheeks, and long black hair pulled back in a band that looked older than her wedding vows. His gaze swept over her, then the children. His expression didn't change. Just paused. She didn't beg. Only stood straighter. "We need warmth," she said. "We won't take up space long." He didn't answer right away. Just studied her like he was weighing something more than danger. Maybe hope. Maybe ghosts. Then he stepped aside. No words. No gestures. Just enough space for her to enter. Inside was warmth, fire, and silence. The kind of silence that's not empty but full. The kind built over years by someone who's learned the wind has more to say than most men. The children hesitated until she nodded. They slipped in, huddled by the hearth, eyes wide. She closed the door softly behind her, then turned to face him. "Thank you," she said. He only nodded once, then crossed to the far side of the room and crouched near a basket of kindling. His movements were practiced, quiet. Everything about him felt quiet. Not fragile, but chosen. She didn't ask his name. He didn't ask hers. He passed the children bread, thick, coarsely torn. They devoured it without speech. She watched, only taking a bite when the smallest girl finally stopped shaking. The man sat near the fire, not close but not distant either, and began sharpening a knife. Not threateningly. Just as ritual. Steel against stone, steady and patient. The boy leaned closer to her. "Is he Injun?" "Hush," she whispered. "He's a man who opened his door. That's all that matters now." The youngest girl, her cheeks still red from cold, pointed at a woven rug in the corner. The woman helped her lay down there, wrapped in an old wool coat they'd carried across 2 counties. The other children followed. She remained standing, unsure. Her hands clutched each other to stay still. "I'll sleep by the door," she offered. "We'll be gone by sunrise." His eyes lifted just slightly. Then he pointed to a fur pelt near the fire. "Warmest spot." She hesitated. "You and them," he said simply. His voice was deeper than she expected. Not gruff. Just heavy, like someone who rarely spent words on anything less than necessary. She gathered the children close and lay them across the pelt. The heat soaked into their bones. Within minutes their breathing evened. The fire cracked softly. Snow tapped at the walls like fingers of the past. He sat again near the hearth. She could see now that his eyes were tired but not unkind. They met hers once, then dropped to the knife again. "What do you want?" she asked, barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. "Why'd you let us in?" He paused. A log shifted in the fire. Then quietly, "Storm's no place for children." "Neither is the world," she thought, but didn't say. She wrapped the coat tighter and let her eyes drift closed, trusting for the first time in months that no door would slam, no bottle would shatter, no screams would wake the children. In that room carved from silence, grief softened. Just enough to rest. She woke once in the night. He was still there, sitting upright, eyes open, as if he hadn't slept at all. A protector. Or perhaps just a man who remembered what it meant to be hunted by the cold. She let herself sleep again. By morning, the storm had lessened to a hush. The wind moved like breath now, not a threat but a warning remembered. The children stirred slowly. The boy found his way to the fire and began feeding it small twigs, mimicking what he'd seen. The Navajo man rose and stepped outside. When he returned, his boots were dusted with snow and his hands full of dry wood. She stood. Her legs ached from days of walking. "We'll be gone before midday." He set the wood down beside the fire. Looked at her calmly. "No need," he said. The children's eyes flicked to hers. For the first time in days they weren't filled with fear. She swallowed hard. "Why?" He didn't shrug, didn't smile. Just said, "You're not the only ones who came through the wind." Her chest tightened. She looked around the room, now bathed in morning gold. A place that wasn't home but didn't feel foreign anymore. "Thank you," she said again. He turned back toward the fire, stoking it gently. "You can stay. Till the wind settles." And for the first time since leaving that broken house behind, she believed that maybe, just maybe, it would. The wind had quieted, but it hadn't left. It pressed against the thick walls like a memory still testing the locks. Inside, the fire had sunk into a deep orange glow, its breath rising in slow embers, soft as moth wings. The children slept tangled in blankets that didn't match and still smelled faintly of smoke and cedar. Their mother woke early, muscles stiff, back sore, but heart heavier than both. She watched them for a moment, tiny fists clutching fabric, mouths parted in innocent peace, and didn't move. The Navajo man was already up. She could hear the axe outside, splitting wood in rhythmic thuds that matched the beat of some old tribal drum she'd heard once long ago but never forgot. The kind that settled into your ribs instead of your ears. She stepped outside, wrapping herself tight in her shawl. Her boots crunched against half-melted snow. He didn't look up as she approached. Just brought the axe down once more, clean and steady, before finally speaking. "Storm's past." She nodded. "It has." He handed her 2 logs. She took them, surprised by their weight. Back inside, she placed them carefully into the fire as the children stirred, blinking slowly as warmth greeted them again. The boy rubbed his eyes and sat up first. His name was Eli. She hadn't said it aloud in front of the man. Names still felt dangerous. The man re-entered moments later, his breath sharp from the morning air. He passed the girl a wooden cup. Water clean and cool. She drank slowly. "Do you have a name?" the widow asked, cautious. He paused, then said, "Tahin." She nodded. "Mine's Sarah." There was a long silence between them. Not uncomfortable. Just weighty. He turned to the children. "Yours?" They looked at their mother first. She nodded. "Eli," the boy said. "Ruth," said the older girl. "Josie," said the youngest, with a voice still soft from sleep. Tahin nodded once. Then returned to the hearth, where he began sorting something in a clay pot: beans and blue corn, salted meat, small things that together meant life. That morning passed in shared duties. Sarah scrubbed out the bowls, rinsing them in snowmelt near the back of the home. Her hands stung with cold. Tahin appeared beside her silently and hung a worn, patched blanket across 2 posts, giving her a little privacy, a little dignity. She didn't speak, but when she returned inside, her eyes were glassy. Later, Eli offered to help Tahin stack wood. He was too small, too clumsy, but determined. Tahin said nothing, simply handed him a smaller piece and watched the boy try. By midday, the girls were giggling over a carved bone whistle Ruth found in a basket by the wall. Sarah started to scold them, but Tahin only raised his hand softly. "Let them." He sat near the fire, whittling something from a cedar branch. His fingers were thick and strong, but delicate in their movement. Sarah watched him for a long time. When the stew was ready, they all sat together, though not too close. The children sat between the adults. There were no questions, no conversations about the past. But there were nods. Small glances of approval when Josie wiped her chin with her sleeve and Sarah gently cleaned it. A smile from Eli when Tahin slid a second chunk of meat into his bowl. After the meal, the children napped in the corner, warm bellies turning into soft snores. Sarah stepped outside again, breathing in the air that was no longer sharp but heavy with thaw and earth. Tahin joined her moments later, arms folded, gaze cast toward the horizon. "Do you live out here alone?" she asked. He nodded. "Sometime now." She studied his profile. "That by choice?" Pause. "Yes." She didn't press. But the ache in his voice matched the one she tried to keep buried. It lived in the pauses. The restraint. The silence between breaths. He pointed toward the nearby ridge. "My brother and I built the corral past that line. Long ago." "What happened?" Tahin didn't answer right away. Just turned back toward the house. Inside, Josie had rolled from her blanket and was reaching for the pot. Sarah rushed in, caught her before the hot lid could burn her fingers. The girl whimpered but quieted when Tahin knelt and handed her a carved horse. Wooden. Painted with ochre and black. Tail missing. Josie cradled it like something precious. That night, the fire glowed brighter. Sarah combed Ruth's hair and braided it for the first time since they'd fled. The little girl sat proudly beside Tahin, who handed her a string of blue beads without ceremony. She gasped and hugged them to her chest. "Tahin," she said, testing the name on her tongue like it was both sacred and familiar. Sarah met his eyes. "Thank you." He inclined his head slightly. Not to dismiss her. Just because he didn't know what to do with praise. When the children finally slept, Sarah stayed awake, staring at the fire. She spoke without looking at him. "My husband drank. Beat the children. Me worse." He said nothing. "I stayed too long. Thought I had to. Until one day he tried to trade Josie for 2 bottles and a dice game. Now he turned. I left that night." The silence between them grew heavier. "I don't know how to trust anymore," she said. "But I trust this fire. And how my children sleep in its warmth." Tahin said nothing for several heartbeats. Then, "Trust doesn't start with words. Starts with staying." She met his gaze. Her throat caught. "I don't want to bring danger to you." "You didn't," he said. And then, as if summoned by that word, danger, a knock shattered the calm. It wasn't forceful. But it didn't belong to the wind either. Tahin moved first, stepping to the door with the smooth grace of someone who expected trouble, but never ran from it. He opened the door just a crack. A white man stood outside, shoulders hunched against the dusk. He wore a worn brown coat, patchy beard and greedy eyes. A traveling peddler with a mule behind him and a snake's smile stretched across thin lips. "Evenin'," he said, squinting past Tahin into the house. Tahin said nothing. "Looking for a woman?" Said to be on foot with 3 young uns. Heard there's a fella out this way might be shelterin' strangers. Tahin's hand stayed on the door. You heard wrong. I dunno, the man said, chuckling. Reckon I might know what I saw. Word she stole some things might have run out on her husband. That's bounty-worthy, ain't it? Inside, Sarah pressed the children close, whispering calm. Tahin stepped out fully. I don't deal in bounty. The peddler's eyes narrowed. I ain't making trouble, just passing word. You do well not to hide fugitives, though. Tahin took a step forward, eyes unreadable. You done talking? The man blinked. The wind picked up again, fluttering the ends of Tahin's coat like warning flags. Just words, friend, the peddler muttered. He tugged the reins and disappeared down the trail without looking back. Tahin waited until the shape of him was swallowed by dark. Inside, Sarah's hands were trembling. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have never come. Tahin turned to her, voice steady. He won't return. But if he does, he leaves without breath. Her eyes widened. She stood slowly, stepping toward him. I can't ask you to protect us. You didn't. The children clung to her skirts, watching him with wide eyes. But there was no fear in them now. Only something new. Something closer to safety. Tahin looked at Sarah, then at the three faces beside her. If you stay, he said, you won't stand alone. She stared at him, words caught somewhere in her ribs. We don't have a place, she said. Not really. He looked back at the fire. Then make one here. For a long time no one moved. Then Ruth whispered something so soft it might have been the crackle of ash. Can we? Sarah dropped to her knees beside the fire, held all three children to her chest and whispered back, I think we already have. Morning unfolded like a soft sigh. The kind of light that didn't spill but crept in, cautious as a guest. Sarah stirred first, rising quietly from the woven mat where she and the children now slept. 4 days, her body had carried tension like a coiled spring. This morning it didn't. Tahin had already been out for some time. She found him beyond the edge of the clearing, standing in stillness with his hand on the flank of a shaggy, chestnut-colored horse. It was the first time she'd seen him touch something so gently. You ride? She asked. Only when I have to. She didn't press further. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It had become a rhythm. Behind them, the children were waking. Josie's high-pitched hum, Eli's thudding steps, Ruth's soft calls for her shawl. They spilled from the door like light, barefoot and giddy with spring thaw. There was still snow under the trees, but the grass had begun to win. Ruth gathered early flowers, holding them like treasure. Josie ran in circles until she fell laughing into a pile of dry leaves. Sarah started toward them, but Tahin raised a hand gently. They're fine. She hesitated. I'm not used to fine. That will change. Later that day, Tahin set out 3 small stones in a triangle near the house. He nodded toward Eli. Help me. The boy lit up like kindling. His hands were too small for the spade, but his spirit outpaced his skill. They dug together in silence, a boy with wide eyes and a man whose hands remembered earth like prayer. What are we planting? Eli asked. Corn. Won't grow. Mama says we'll move on soon. Tahin looked at him. Still worth planting. Inside, Sarah sewed by the fire, repairing torn hems and letting the silence settle on her shoulders like a cloak. She could feel the walls around her soul softening, but she didn't trust the feeling. She'd been happy before, briefly, and it had cost her everything. The next day, Tahin placed a small bundle in front of her. Cloth, needles, dyed thread. What's this for? She asked. You made old things new, he said simply. Maybe now you can make something just yours. She didn't speak. Just ran her fingers over the colors, reds, turquoise, pale yellows. Shades she hadn't touched since her own wedding dress, which had long since turned to ash. That night, after the children had fallen asleep curled together like puppies, she approached the fire where Tahin sat carving wood. I keep waiting to pay for all this. He glanced at her. You don't owe me. I've learned nothing comes free. This isn't a trade, he said. This is what people do when they remember their people. Her throat caught, and for the first time her fingers touched his, not tightly, not intentionally, but their skin brushed as she passed him a bowl of stew. He didn't pull away. Days passed. Then a week. The children stopped flinching in their sleep. Ruth began calling him Uncle Tahin. Josie mimicked his way of squinting at the sun. Eli insisted on helping with every chore, no matter how small. They weren't healed, but they had stopped bleeding. One evening, Sarah stepped outside after supper. The moon hung low, swollen with silver. She watched as Tahin taught Eli how to listen for bird calls. His hands mimed wings, then fell still. The boy nodded, listening with his whole body. She hadn't known men like that existed. Inside, she folded the cloth he'd given her and began stitching a simple design. 4 figures, hand in hand beneath a hoop of stars. The quiet was broken days later by a knock. Not thunderous. Not hostile. But not from the wind either. Tahan opened the door carefully, his stance unchanged. A man stood there, white leather vest, short hat, thin mouth twisted into a polite smile. Beside him, a horse tethered to a post at the edge of the yard. "Good evening," the man said. "Name's Purdy. I'm sheriff over in Cedar Hollow." Tahan didn't move. "What do you want?" "Well," Purdy said, tugging at his gloves, "I'm tracking a report out of Franklin. Missing woman, 3 kids. Belongs to a fella named Archibald Hayes. Claims she's his wife. Says she ran off with the young'uns, took things weren't hers." Tahan stepped forward. "She took children. Not things." "Well now," the sheriff said, holding up his hands, "that's not my call to make. I'm just here to check the claim." "You checked," Tahan said. The sheriff laughed lightly, but his eyes were sharp. "I'll need to speak with her. She's not yours to question." "I've got legal cause," Purdy said. "This here's a lawful warrant." He produced a paper, folded and thin. Tahan didn't touch it. "You brought law to the wrong home." Behind him, Sarah had stepped into the doorway, holding Josie in her arms. Her face was pale but firm. "I won't go back," she said. "And I'll testify to what he did if I must. But not today. Not now. Not while my children sleep." The sheriff studied her. "I ain't here to make a scene." "Then don't," Tahan said. Purdy held his ground. "You know harboring fugitives can be seen as obstruction. You know forcing children back to a drunk is called cowardice," Tahan replied. There was silence. Then the sheriff gave a slight nod. "I'll be back," he said, stepping off the porch. "Next time with more than paper." "You'd better bring more than that," Tahan murmured. Purdy mounted his horse and rode off without a glance behind him. Inside, the firelight flickered as Sarah laid Josie down. She didn't speak. Neither did Tahan. But she didn't retreat to the corner of the room either. She stayed beside him. "You don't have to keep us," she said. He didn't look away from the fire. "But I will. Even with the law watching? They can watch. Doesn't mean they see." She sat beside him. The space between their shoulders shrank. "Eli asked if he could call you father." Tahan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. "And you?" "I don't know what to call you yet," she whispered. "But I know I don't want to leave." That night, he carved 4 initials into the wood above the hearth. Small, delicate, easy to miss. But not to those who lived there. In the morning, the children found the initials and asked who put them there. Tahan only smiled. Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and full of something unspoken. In the stillness of that home, something sacred was taking root. Not loudly. Not with vows or rings or dissertations. Just with staying. And outside, the earth softened. And in the soil, seeds bloomed. It started with silence. Not the kind that comforted. Not the kind that tucked children into dreams and laced dawns with peace. This silence felt tight. Stretched. Like a rope about to fray. Sarah felt it before she saw it. A weight behind the wind. A wrongness in the way the birds hushed at once. She stepped outside with a bucket, but her hands didn't reach the pump. Her eyes fixed on the ridge instead. A dust trail. Someone was coming. By the time the rider reached the edge of the clearing, Tahan was already standing there, arms folded across his chest, shoulders unmoved. Sarah joined him slowly. She didn't need to see his face to know who it was. Archibald Hayes. The man who used to swear he loved her just before knocking her to the floor. The man who said children were mouths, not blessings. The man who once tried to trade his daughter for whiskey and a knife that gleamed in torchlight. He dismounted with theatrical slowness, dusting off his coat like someone arriving to collect what was rightfully his. Well, he drawled, eyeing Sarah. "Ain't you a sight? Thought you'd run further. But here you are. Playing house with a redskin." Tahan didn't move. Sarah did. She stepped forward before he could take another inch of soil. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "You have no claim here." "I got law behind me," he sneered. "Wife's gone rogue, took the kids, stole things weren't hers. Towns are looking. Sheriff already knows." "I told the sheriff what you were," she said. "He saw enough not to drag me back." "You got no proof?" Archibald spat. "Ain't no bruises now. Ain't no papers saying the brats are yours." "I carried them," she whispered. "I bled for them. That's all the claim I need." He stepped toward her and then halted, because Tahin moved. No words, just one step, but the kind that speaks volumes. Archibald shifted, feigning calm. Don't know who you think you are, but this ain't your fight. Tahin's voice came low and quiet. Then why are you standing on my land? Archibald's hand twitched near his belt. Sarah saw it. So did Tahin. The moment hung, silent, dangerous. From behind the door, Eli's voice called. Mama? Sarah turned. Stay inside. Too late. The children stepped out, clinging to the threshold, eyes wide. Archibald's gaze landed on them. You little bastard still alive, huh? Well, you're coming with me. Josie whimpered. Ruth stepped in front of her, fists clenched. You're not our daddy, she said. Sarah's breath caught. Archibald moved forward, and in that instant, Eli raised the slingshot Tahin had carved. He didn't flinch, didn't ask. He just aimed. A rock flew, striking Archibald square in the cheek. The man roared, stumbled, and reached for his belt. But before his hand found the pistol, Tahin had closed the space between them. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need to. He stood in front of Sarah, body taut, face unreadable. This is the last time you breathe on this land, he said. Archibald wavered, blood trailing down his cheek. I'll bring others, he spat. You'll regret this. No, Tahin said. You will. And from the shadows beyond the trees, shapes began to move. 3 men. Silent. Tall. Faces marked with paint and time. Navajo. They stepped forward, not aggressively, just present. Witnesses. Brothers. Archibald's sneer cracked. His hand dropped. He backed toward his horse, muttering curses that sounded smaller than the wind. When he left, he didn't look back. Sarah collapsed onto her knees as the children ran to her. Tahin didn't move for a long while. Then he knelt beside her. His hand touched her back, not possessively, just steady. Human. Present. I thought I was going to lose them, she whispered. You won't. I didn't know I could be this angry. You've earned it. The other Navajo men stepped forward, nodding once to Tahin, then fading back into the trees like smoke. No ceremony. No words. Later that night, Sarah sat by the fire. Tahin placed something in her lap. A small necklace, turquoise oval set in old silver. The clasp was worn. It was my mother's, he said. She wore it the day my brother left for war. She said if we forgot who we were, we'd never come home again. Sarah touched the pendant softly. I can't take this. You already did, he said. She stared at the fire. Then at him. The children were asleep in the corner, curled like foxes. You know this isn't over, she said. It never is, he replied. But it's ours now. Sarah reached for his hand, not out of thanks. Not out of obligation. Just because. He held it. She leaned her head against his shoulder. In that moment, no papers, no judges, no threats mattered. Only the quiet and the fire, and the way her name sounded safe in his silence. The next morning came without birdsong. No breeze. Just the sharp stillness that only arrives when something is about to break. Tahin stood outside long before the sun rose, watching the road. His jaw was set. His eyes unreadable. He hadn't spoken much since Archibald left bruised and shamed 2 days ago. But something in his posture told Sarah everything she needed to know. He was waiting. Sarah joined him with a shawl wrapped tight, hair damp from washing, hands clenched in the fabric. Do you think he'll return? She asked. Tahin didn't answer. He didn't need to. The weight in the air already had. Inside, Ruth braided Josie's hair while Eli stoked the fire the way Tahin taught him. The house was quiet but not afraid. Not anymore. By midday, the sun had begun to fade behind darkening clouds. Thunder rolled somewhere behind the hills. It was as if even the sky was holding its breath. Then came the sound. Multiple. Tahin stepped forward. Sarah followed, her shoulders drawn tight. 3 riders approached. Archibald led them. His face still bore the mark where Eli's rock had struck, now dark purple against sallow skin. His mouth was curled in a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him rode 2 others, mercenaries likely hired from town. One held a rifle. The other chewed tobacco with lazy indifference. This here's the last ask, Archibald called as he dismounted. You send her and the children out. I won't touch a hair on your red head. Tahin stepped forward. You shouldn't have returned. Law's too slow, Archibald sneered. Sometimes a man's gotta take back what's his. Sarah came to stand beside Tahin. Her voice was calm but fierce. I was never yours. And they sure as hell weren't. The man with the rifle laughed. She's got a mouth. The other one spat in the dirt. You want us to go in or just shoot? Tahin raised his hand once. The motion was small, but everything stilled. No one enters this house, he said. No one takes what doesn't belong. Archibald scoffed. What's this? You gonna out-talk bullets? Tahin didn't move. No. But I'll bleed before I let you touch them. Then, from the edge of the trees, 3 Navajo men emerged again. One had a bow. One had a knife. The third, an elder, simply watched. The rifleman shifted uneasily. Tahin's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Turn around. Archibald reached for his gun. The moment shattered. A shot rang out, but it didn't come from Tahin. It came from Eli. He hadn't aimed to kill. But he had fired Tahin's old rifle, lifted from the back room where he taught the boy how to hold it, how to breathe before pulling the trigger. The shot hit the dirt near Archibald's boot. Everything froze. Tahin stepped forward then, faster than breath. He disarmed Archibald in a blink, knocked the revolver to the snow, and drove him to the ground. The rifleman raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the Navajo elder moved. No weapon. Just a cry, low and guttural, that stopped the horses. That turned fear into fire. The mercenaries backed off. The rifle hit the ground. The horse reared. Archibald lay on his back, mud seeping into his coat. Tahin stood over him, breathing steady. If you return again, you won't leave. Sarah stepped forward and threw Archibald's revolver far into the woods. It landed with a hollow clatter, swallowed by trees. He left then, without speaking, without swagger, without anything but the shape of defeat curling around his spine. That night the storm did come, but it was rain, not war. Soft, steady, cleansing. Sarah stood at the doorway and watched it fall. Ruth and Josie played beside the fire. Eli sat carving his first figurine, his brow furrowed in the same way Tahin's often was. Behind her, Tahin entered and handed her a folded piece of cloth. I made a space beside mine. She turned to him slowly. A space. For your dress, he said. Your stitching's better than mine. She smiled. That's not hard. He didn't smile back, not fully, but there was warmth in his eyes. He placed one hand gently on her waist. Stay. I never planned to leave again. Later they all sat together, no longer strangers, no longer guests. A family not forged by blood or vows, but by storms weathered together. Tahin whispered something in Navajo, a prayer or maybe a poem. Sarah didn't understand all of it, but she understood his voice, and that was enough. She leaned into his side, hand resting on his chest. This house, she said softly, it wasn't built for this, was it? No, he replied. But it grew anyway. She looked at the children, then at the fire. Like seeds. He nodded. Like seeds. And when the storm passed and the sun returned, timid, pale but promising, Sarah opened the door and stepped outside barefoot. The land smelled of earth. Of beginning. She planted the first wildflower by the door. Ruth planted the second. Josie added a rock. Eli stood with a stick in the shape of a cross. Tahin joined them in silence. No prayers. Just presence. Because some families weren't born, they were chosen. And some homes weren't made of walls and roofs. They were made of moments. Of standing beside someone when the world tried to drag them back. Of teaching a child how to aim without hate. Of placing a necklace around a woman's throat not to own her, but to say she belonged. Not because she had to, but because she chose to stay. The hoofprints were too fresh. Tatsiai crouched low in the snow, his fingers brushing the indentions. Wagon tracks, mostly covered by drifting powder, led north, wrong direction for sane men this time of year. The mountains had already claimed 2 travelers last week. No settler would be foolish enough to take this pass now, unless they meant to leave something behind. He rose without a sound. Wind combed through the pinyon trees above, scattering loose flakes down onto his shoulders and the blanket tied across his chest. A thin ribbon of wood smoke twisted in the air, a smell that did not belong to his campfire. Not his fire at all. His brow furrowed. Someone had entered his hugan. He didn't run. Tatsiai never ran. But each step was quick, precise, his moccasins leaving barely a whisper on the snow-covered stone. The silence around him was too still, too expectant. Even the ravens had gone quiet. The door flaps swayed slightly in the wind when he arrived. Inside, it was dark save for the low red glow of dying embers. He stepped through the threshold and paused. She lay there, curled against the packed earth floor like a broken doll, wedding lace torn and muddied, the hem soaked through with half-melted slush. Her boots were gone. Her fingers blue at the edges. Hair the color of wheat straw tangled across her cheek, half frozen to the skin. One hand twitched. The other clutched a torn strip of white cloth. A bride. In his home. Tatsui did not move for a long breath. His jaw tightened, then loosened. He closed the flap behind him, cutting off the cold wind's howl. Silence settled over them like snow. He moved closer, cautious as if approaching a wounded animal. Kneeling, he pressed 2 fingers to the hollow beneath her jaw. A pulse. Faint. But there. He exhaled. She reeked of fear. Not sweat, not blood, fear. It clung to her skin like the smoke clinging to his hearthstones. He didn't ask questions. There was no one to answer them. With care he lifted her. She weighed little. Too little. Her body trembled as if fighting off more than just cold. Tatsui wrapped her in a buffalo hide and laid her beside the embers. He added a dry log to the fire, watched it catch. Then, pulling his knife from its sheath, he sat cross-legged beside her, blade across his knees. Night fell in full. She didn't stir. Only once did her lips move. A whisper. One word cracked and weak. Please? He watched her all through the dark, the same way a mountain lion might watch a storm roll in, tense, wary, untrusting of anything that came uninvited. She awoke with a scream. Tatsui didn't flinch. She clawed backward, nearly toppling the kettle behind her. Her hair was soaked with sweat now, her eyes wide with terror. She looked at the door. Then him. Then the door again. Don't touch me, she gasped, her voice hoarse. I didn't, he said simply. She blinked. That voice, it wasn't cruel. Just quiet. Like a drum with its skin soaked through. She clutched the blanket tighter to her chest and noticed for the first time she was alive. She looked down at her feet, wiggled her toes beneath the hide. Her shoulders collapsed in a shuddering breath. Then she began to cry. Not loud. Just a wet, silent collapse of sound, like snow falling from an overburdened branch. Tatsui watched her, unmoving. When she looked up again, the fire had grown. He was still beside it. A bowl of something warm waited on the stone between them. You live alone? She asked, voice shaking. He gave a small nod. She glanced toward the walls, bare save for a few carved figures, bundles of herbs, an old rifle. You speak English. He shrugged. Enough. Silence again. She tried to sit straighter but winced, holding her ribs. Her limp was visible now as she adjusted her leg under the blanket. An old wound. Or something deeper. She saw him glance, then look away. They left me, she whispered. My pa. My new husband. Her voice cracked on the word husband like it burned her tongue. Said I was damaged. Not worth a second meal. He didn't answer. They took my boots. Said maybe I'd find someone who liked broken things. Her eyes met his, desperate to be seen. Not pitted, just seen. Tatsui's gaze didn't waver. You are not broken, he said. She blinked. It sounded like a sentence carved from stone. Final. True. A truth she hadn't dared say aloud. What's your name? He asked at last. Nora. He nodded. Tatsui. Taja? He chuckled once, the sound dry as the desert. Close. Outside the wind had eased. Inside, the kettle hissed gently as it boiled. Nora sipped from the bowl he'd set down, both hands shaking. It was thick with stew, meat, sage, maybe squash. Her stomach recoiled at first, then opened like a door kicked in. She ate without speaking. He let her. At last, she looked at him with something like suspicion. You're not gonna ask what happened? Where I came from? He poked the fire, his eyes distant. You came from pain. You ended here. That's enough. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Nora's gaze drifted across the interior. There were things here that felt full. Not just lived in but loved. A basket mended carefully with thread. A child's stone carving set gently on a shelf. A comb made from bone. There was no woman's touch. But there had been love once. You lost someone too, she said. Tatsui didn't reply. But his stillness said everything. She tried to sleep again. The fire snapped. A wind keened outside like something half dead. Her eyes stayed open. She thought of the wagon. The laughter. The cold road. And the shove. Stay gone, her new husband had growled, drunk off half a bottle of whiskey. You ain't woman enough to carry my name. Gonna give me bent-legged children, no thanks? The sheriff had chuckled. Even her father had turned his back. They had said she was too slow, too quiet, too strange, always reading, always walking crooked. No man wants pity at the dinner table. She had cried then. Now she didn't. In the early hours she sat up, fire still glowing. Tatsui wasn't sleeping, just sitting, eyes open as if he hadn't moved. She cleared her throat. You don't seem surprised that I'm here. He didn't look at her. Men throw away what they do not understand. Even in winter. Her lips parted. That was the most he'd said. Why'd you help me? He finally turned to her. His voice was a soft echo in the dark. Because someone once helped me. And I failed her. The silence that followed was a heavy, sacred thing. And in that silence, Nora tucked the hide around her shoulders, looked out toward the dark curve of the door flap, and said almost to herself, I don't think I want to die anymore. Tatsui didn't speak. But he added another log to the fire. Morning came slow, wrapped in mist. Nora blinked against the firelight, unsure at first where she was. Then she saw him, Tatsui, sitting just outside the Hugan entrance, sharpening a blade on a stone. His breath plumed white in the cold. The blade moved slow and sure, like it had done this dance 1,000 times. He hadn't noticed her watching. Or maybe he had. He just didn't care. She tried to stand, but her left leg buckled beneath her. Pain shot up her thigh, raw and familiar. He turned at the sound, catching her just before she hit the wall. You're not made of stone, you know, she muttered, breathless. He raised a brow. You want stone? She gave a half-smile despite herself. No. Just a second leg that listens. He helped her settle back onto the blanket, then passed her a wooden cup of water and a bit of hard bread. It cracked as she bit into it and she winced. You have salt? She asked. He didn't answer. Just reached behind a basket and handed her a tin. Then returned to sharpening. She studied him between sips. He wasn't like the men she'd known, didn't brag, didn't leer, didn't make space feel smaller when he walked into it. He was silent in a way that made room for things. You always live like this? She asked. Alone? Still sharpening. Not always. Her gaze drifted to the carved doll she'd seen before, small, worn, tucked in the shadowed corner like a memory no one dared disturb. She didn't ask. She'd learned enough from silence to respect its borderlines. I'm not staying, she said instead. He didn't react. I'll leave soon. As soon as the snow clears. Still no reaction. I don't want to bring trouble. He looked up. You already did. That stung, sharper than she expected. But then he added, you're still here. That means something. She looked down at her hands. Pale, cracked, and trembling. Means I don't have anywhere else. A beat passed. Then this is a good place to start. Later that day she tried to walk again. He watched from the woodpile as she limped toward the stream with a battered pail. Her foot caught on a rock. She cursed, loud enough to scare a quail from the brush. Tatsui didn't laugh. But his lips twitched. She turned, flushed. You could have helped, you know? You said you're not staying. Oh, now you listen? He tilted his head. You want help or no? Her shoulders sagged. She held out the bucket. He stepped up beside her, not taking the pail, just adjusting the grip on her wrist so her weight was better balanced. His fingers were warm despite the air. When she steadied, he stepped back again. She said, quieter now, thank you. He just nodded. That night she cooked. It wasn't much, just stewed beans and some dried meat she found in his stores. But she set the bowls carefully, trimmed the wick on the oil lamp, even laid 2 worn spoons side by side. He stared at the setup like it was a riddle. She gestured. It's just supper. You sit. I ladle. That's how it works. He did sit. And he did eat. But the quiet between spoonfuls was thick. You ever had company before? She asked, smirking. He shook his head. Well, she said, you're lucky I'm not the talkative kind. She kept talking anyway. About how her mother used to braid her hair every Sunday. How she liked the smell of old books. How the sky changed color before storms, brighter like the land knew what was coming. He didn't interrupt. But once, when she described the way her father used to sing off-key just to make her laugh, she saw something shift in his eyes. Not quite a smile. More like an old ache surfacing. She pointed to the little doll near the shelf. What's her name? He froze. Sorry, she said quickly. You don't have to. Nashtiji. She looked up. What's that mean? Little one who laughs. Nora swallowed. Was she yours? He nodded once. Then stood without another word and walked outside. Days passed like melted wax. Slow, steady, hard to measure. She started waking before him. Started tending the fire. Sweeping with the awkward little broom. Once she tried drying strips of meat and burned half of them. He ate them anyway. The air between them warmed with tiny things. A shared nod. A caught glance. The way he cut her walking stick from pine and carved it with a tiny leaf pattern at the base. No explanation. Just handed it to her like it was always meant to be hers. One morning she tripped coming in and dropped an entire basket of foraged sage. "Damn it," she hissed, crouching to gather the leaves. He looked over and said deadpan, "This your usual grace?" She stared at him. "You made a joke," she whispered. "Tatsui, was that actual humor?" He smirked. "Don't get used to it." One evening a sound shattered their stillness. She bolted up, nearly stumbling over the firewood. Tatsui grabbed the rifle from above the doorway and stepped out, slow and controlled. She followed behind, heart pounding. A single rider in a tan coat approached, leading a mule. The man waved lazily, too confident. Tatsui didn't wave back. The man reined in a few yards away. "Evening. Thought I saw smoke. Figured I'd check who was trespassing." "This is Navajo land," Tatsui said. The man smiled. "Everything out here's disputed, brother. You seen a girl pass through? White dress. Limp?" Nora stiffened. Tatsui didn't look back. "No one like that." "You sure?" Tatsui said nothing. The rider scanned the area, squinting toward the Hugin. "Strange world. Women go missing and sometimes don't want to be found." Then he turned the mule around and rode off, slow as he came. Only when the hoofbeats faded did Tatsui exhale. Nora stepped forward. "He's from Carson Junction. I recognize that voice." Tatsui's hands curled into fists. "He will come back. With others." She felt the heat drain from her face. "Then I'll leave tonight." "No." Her head snapped toward him. "You won't make it 2 miles in snow. You'll die." Her voice shook. "Then what do you want me to do? Stay and hide like a ghost?" He stepped close, eyes dark. "I want you to survive." That night she packed anyway. Not much. Just a tin of beans, a knife, a scarf. She'd take the old mule tied near the bluff and ride hard toward San Elmo. She made it as far as the stream. That's where he found her. Standing barefoot, holding the reins, tears drying on her cheeks like frost. "Don't stop me," she said. He didn't. Just walked up beside her, looked out at the moonlit horizon. "I had a wife once," he said. "From the trading post. She liked wildflowers and could outshoot me at 20 yards. Her father didn't like me. Said I was a mud-skinned devil." She looked at him. "They burned her in front of me. Said it was justice." He was shaking now. But not with rage. With the force it took not to fall apart. She was pregnant. Her name was Clara. Nora's throat closed. "I'm sorry. I buried her on this hill. Under that stone." He pointed. "And then I stopped speaking." He turned to her, voice softer than wind through grass. "Don't run. Don't disappear. You're not nothing." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "Stay," he said, "until the spring." She didn't answer. But she led the mule back to the post and tied it without a word. And in the quiet just before dawn, as the fire died low again, she placed her bag near the hearth and sat beside him. Neither of them said it aloud. But she wasn't leaving. Not yet. The tracks weren't fresh. But they weren't old enough to ignore. Tatsui crouched near the pine grove just east of the river, fingers brushing the print. A boot. Narrow. Sharp heel. Settler made. A horse had stepped beside it, heavy, not wild. The rider knew this land, or thought he did. They'd circled back. Tatsui rose slowly. A wind stirred the trees. Downstream, a squirrel barked out a warning cry. He was being watched. He didn't flinch. Just turned, slow and deliberate, and walked the long way back. When he reached the Hugin, Nora was tending to the small patch of herbs beside the door, the snow melted back by careful firestone placement. She looked up at his face and knew before he said a word. "They found you?" "Not yet," he said. "But they're close." Her hands trembled as she brushed soil from her palms. "How many?" "One rider today. But he's not alone. The rest will follow soon." She looked down. "He said he would. Said I was a thief. That I stole a wedding. That if I ran, I'd be hunted like one." "You didn't steal anything," Tatsui said. "I stole hope," she said bitterly. "They paid for a bride who could walk straight, bear sons, keep quiet. And I didn't fit." He didn't correct her. Just looked toward the trees, jaw tight. "We'll leave by nightfall." She blinked. "We? I know the land better than they know their own rifles." She shook her head. "You don't have to." "I know, Nora." That stopped her. And for the first time since she'd arrived, she felt what it meant to be chosen. Not rescued, not pitted. Chosen. They left as dusk settled low, the light soft and golden on the tree bark. Tatsui led on foot, bow strapped to his back, rifle slung low. Nora rode the old mule, her new walking stick tied across the saddle. Every so often she glanced behind them. But no riders came. Not yet. The river was half frozen but still flowed in thick curls. They followed its curve toward the canyon pass, where the ice broke just enough to cross. "Why the river?" she asked. "They won't expect it," he said. "They think like men who've only ever owned land, not lived inside it." The sky bruised to deep indigo. Stars blinked through the dark like scattered embers. Somewhere in the far ridge, a coyote cried. By midnight, they reached a narrow bank under a cliff face. A place of protection. Smoke wouldn't rise here. Sound wouldn't carry. Tatsiai stopped. "We stay here," he said. Nora dismounted, nearly slipping on the frozen grass. He caught her arm again, steady always, and this time she didn't pull away. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Helping me?" "No." "That simple?" He looked at her. "It's not simple. It's true." She felt the warmth of that word like it was pressed into her skin. They built a fire low, using the smallest branches, packed with snow to hide the light. The flames licked silently, smoke sinking instead of rising. She sat beside him, both wrapped in cloaks, boots pressed near the stone ring. For a long time they said nothing. Then he asked, "What happened after?" She didn't answer right away. "Then, after I ran?" He nodded. "I was shoved out of the wagon before sundown. My father said I embarrassed him. That if I wasn't fit to be a wife, I wasn't fit to be a daughter." Her voice was low, hard. "I walked for a day with no shoes. My feet bled. A woman at a ranch out west threw me scraps when her husband wasn't watching. Then she told me to head for the ridge. Said there was a Navajo camp that kept to themselves." Tatsiai said nothing, just stared into the fire. "I didn't know where I was going," she whispered. "I was just done running." Pause. "And now?" She met his gaze. "Now I'm scared I'll lose the only thing that feels safe." The wind shifted then. Tatsiai rose. Nora's breath caught. "You hear something?" He raised a hand. Crack. Brush splitting. Then voices. "Mel. Close." He grabbed his rifle, fast and silent, and pulled her back from the fire. "Get to the riverbank. Lie flat. No sound." She obeyed. Footsteps. 3 men now. "Saw smoke, swear I did. Maybe they're camped just beyond." "You sure she came this way?" "Sheriff said she wouldn't get far." Tatsiai's jaw tightened. A boot crunched snow just above the river's edge. Tatsiai moved fast. The first man never saw the butt of the rifle before it hit him clean across the temple. He fell, no sound but breath escaping. The second raised a pistol, too slow. Tatsiai fired once. The shot echoed, swallowed by the cliffs. The third scrambled back, slipping on ice, hands shaking. We're not here to kill." "Then go," Tatsiai said coldly. "And tell your lawman this land doesn't answer to men like him." The third man ran. Nora crawled up the bank, heart racing. 1 man dead. 1 unconscious. 1 fled. She stared at the blood on the snow. Tatsiai didn't speak. He just grabbed her hand. "We need to move. Now." By dawn, they'd followed the river downstream, then cut east toward a narrow ravine Tatsiai had known since boyhood. He kept his hand at her back as they climbed, half guiding, half steadying. She slipped once. "Damn this leg," she muttered. "You're doing fine," he said. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "I'm slowing you down." "You're still beside me," he said. "That's all that matters." They reached the top just as the sun broke. The river gleamed red and gold far below, like a vein split open across the land. They paused, breathless. Nora sat on a stone and pressed her hand to her chest. "You killed a man," she whispered. "I protected you." She didn't argue. "Are you afraid of me now?" he asked. She looked at him, long and quiet. "No," she said. "Not even a little." They set up camp in a small hollow beneath a ridge. No one would find them for days. The wind here was thick with juniper and old silence. Tatsiai skinned a rabbit. She prepared herbs. They didn't speak much, but everything between them felt known. That night, she leaned her head on his shoulder without asking. He didn't move. "Tell me something true," she murmured. "I dream of her sometimes," he said. "My first wife, Clara." "What do you dream?" "That she's alive. That we're walking near the canyon. That I'm laughing." "You miss her?" He nodded. She touched his hand. "I'm not her," she said. "I know. But I won't run again. Not unless you tell me to." He turned to her, his eyes raw with something unspoken. "I won't," he said. A beat. Then she whispered, "Do you believe a broken thing can bloom again?" He touched her limp leg gently, reverently. "You're not broken," he said. "You're weathered. That's different." She laughed, soft and wet. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, once just at the corner of his mouth. He closed his eyes and for a moment didn't breathe. They slept wrapped together that night, not out of want, but of trust. And just before sleep took her, she whispered, "If we survive this, I won't leave." And in the dark he answered, "I'll make sure we do." The snow was thinner now. It clung only to shadows and low hollows, patchy and wet underfoot, vanishing beneath the warming pull of late winter. A change was coming. Nora felt it not just in the air but in her limbs. The ache in her leg was different these days. Not pain. Not quite. More like memory leaving the body. They had been in the hollow nearly a week. No riders. No gunshots. Only the calls of hawks, the rush of meltwater in the creek, and the quiet rhythm of survival shared between two people who no longer needed many words. That morning Tatsiai found her standing at the edge of the bluff, hair loose, face tilted toward the sun. She didn't startle when he approached. "Almost forgot what warmth feels like," she murmured. He didn't answer. Just stood beside her, eyes sweeping the horizon. "I had a sister," she said suddenly. "Ellen. Younger. Prettier. Walked like wind over grass. She was the one they wanted. Not me." She glanced down at the stream. "But she ran off with a stable boy the week before my wedding. So they sent me instead." Tatsiai didn't flinch. "You came in her place?" Nora nodded. "I was the backup. The unwanted replacement." He looked at me like a sick animal before he even said, "I do." He turned toward her. "But you left in your place. You didn't stay what they made you." She blinked, caught in the truth of it. "You ever think," she whispered, "that maybe we're all just trying to make something sacred out of what's been thrown away?" He looked at her, not with pity, but with that unshakable quiet that had once frightened her. Now it steadied her. "You already have." She spent that day preparing food, cutting roots, salting strips of meat, folding what few garments she had with neat hands. There was a peace to it. Like nesting. Like claiming space that once felt borrowed. Tatsiai brought her a bundle wrapped in hide. "Found this near the ridge," he said. She unwrapped it and laughed. "Wildflowers. Bright yellow ones. Their stems brittle but still holding. They don't even belong to this season," she said. "They're stubborn," he replied. "Like someone I know." She tucked one behind her ear and didn't speak again for a while. That evening they sat beneath the stars, side by side, knees touching. "You said you won't leave," he said. She turned to him. "And I meant it." He hesitated. "Even if they return? I'll face them. But not alone." He looked down at his hands. Scarred. Weathered. Fingers that had carved, hunted, buried, and bled. Then, "I lost my voice when Clara died. You made me speak again." She touched his cheek, eyes glinting in the firelight. "And you made me want to live." He leaned in, slow and certain, and she met him halfway. The kiss wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was raw, two broken edges finding a way to fit. They didn't make promises. They didn't need to. The next morning, smoke curled on the horizon. "Not from them. Carson men," Tatsiai said. She didn't ask how he knew. She trusted the tension in his spine. The way his hand hovered over the rifle. The way his gaze narrowed to something hard and ancient. "We don't run this time," she said. He studied her. "They'll bring more than just law. They'll bring shame. And rope. Then we meet them as we are," she said. "Not as what they tried to make us." He took her hand. Calloused in his. Still trembling in hers. "But I want them to know one thing," she added. "What?" "That I'm not alone." They returned to the Hugin by nightfall. It stood untouched, half hidden under pine boughs and snowmelt. She swept the hearth. He fed the fire. Their shared rhythm had returned, only now it was chosen. They spoke little as they prepared. Nora laid out her old wedding dress, what was left of it, folded neatly on the floor like a memory she was finally ready to release. Tatsiai laid his knife across it. "I have no ring," he said. "No priest." "You have your word," she said. "And I have mine." The fire crackled between them. He lifted a painted stone from the shelf, the one carved long ago for a child that never came. He placed it between them like a vow. Then he said quietly, "In the way of my people, when the night is strong and the fire is good, we speak our joining into the flames." She nodded. He took her hand again and spoke in Navajo. She didn't understand the words, but the sound of them settled into her like music she'd always known but never heard aloud. When it was her turn, she whispered, I came here lost. I was given away. Abandoned. But now I give myself. And I choose this. The wind outside howled once. Then faded. And the fire held strong. They lay close that night, not for heat, but for remembrance. Just before dawn, a horse snorted outside. Tatsiai sat up. Nora grabbed her coat. They moved as one, stepping into the cold light of morning. There were 3 riders. One wore a sheriff's badge. The others carried rifles. You Nora Thatcher? The sheriff called. She stepped forward, chin high. I am. Your husband's filed claim. Says you ran from your wedding. Says you're his legal property. I am no one's property. That's not how it works, girl. Tatsiai stepped beside her. Then change how it works. The men raised their rifles. Tatsiai raised none. But Nora reached for the rifle leaning on the porch. Slowly. Deliberately. She's my wife now, Tatsiai said. The sheriff spat. Where's your certificate? He gestured to the fire behind them. Burned. Like the chains you think still hold her. One of the riflemen stepped forward. Sheriff, maybe we? She's coming with us. No, Nora said, voice shaking. I'm staying. And I'll fight if I have to. The sheriff dismounted. Gun drawn. Tatsiai moved fast, grabbing Nora and pulling her behind him. The sheriff raised his weapon. Then paused. Because she had one too, aimed with trembling hands. You shoot him, she said, and I will bury you myself. No one moved. Then the 3rd rider, quietest of the bunch, spoke. She ain't lying, Sheriff. You gonna stand against the law? I'm saying, this ain't law anymore. This is pride. A long pause. Then the sheriff holstered his gun. You want to rot with him, girl, so be it. He turned his horse. The others followed. No shots fired. Just hoofbeats, fading. Tatsiai didn't speak for a long time after. He stood there, eyes on the trail, waiting to be sure. Then he turned to her. You would have shot him. She nodded. He exhaled. Good. That night they burned the old wedding dress. The lace curled in the fire like ash letting go of memory. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Tatsiai carved her name into the wall beside his own. Not in English. Not in Navajo. Just lines and curves, symbols only they understood. And before the snow could melt completely, before the land turned gold again, she knelt in the soil and planted seeds she'd saved from her mother's old garden. Sage, marigold, beans. She sang as she did it, soft, off-key but full of life. Tatsiai watched from the doorway, arms crossed, smiling only with his eyes. Spring wasn't here yet. But they were ready. The night before it all changed, the stars hung low enough to touch. Nora stood barefoot near the edge of the firelight, shawl drawn around her shoulders, her breath fogging in the chill. Behind her, the Hugin stood still and warm, smoke rising in a thin column toward the dark sky. Inside, a single candle flickered. Its flame never wavered. Tatsiai carved in silence beside her. His hands worked a length of wood, shaving it clean, his movements slow and steady. He hadn't said much since the sheriff left. He didn't have to. The world felt like it was holding its breath with them. She turned to him finally, her voice soft. Do you believe they'll come again? He paused, blade resting on his thigh. They always do, he said. Pride rides twice before it sleeps. She nodded. Then let them come. His eyes met hers in the dark. Are you certain? I didn't survive the snow to hide from cowards. A smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. Not joy. Not triumph. Something older. Deeper. Pride. He stood and handed her what he'd carved. It was a ring. A simple band of cedar wood, smooth and warm from his hand. No gem. No gold. Just a circle, unbroken. You made this? She asked, breath caught. I don't have papers, he said. But I have this. And I have you. She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit like it had always belonged there. Marry me, he said, his voice low, steady. Here. Now. No priest, she teased gently. No one to lie, he replied. She stepped closer. Her hand found his chest. Felt his heartbeat like a drum under her fingers. I already did, she whispered. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her fingers one by one, slow, like an oath made flesh. Then, without ceremony, they turned to the fire. She spoke first, eyes on the flames. By the light that kept me alive in the dark, I give myself. He followed. By the silence that watched me break and still stayed, I do the same. No crowd. No dress. Only 2 souls speaking into fire. And something older than words answered back. They woke to gunfire. 3 cracks. Loud. Echoing. Tatsiai rolled from the pallet, rifle already in hand. Nora reached for her coat, heart hammering, eyes already adjusting to the blue morning light. Hoofbeats. Fast. Angry. They came back, he said. She stood, steady despite the fear. Then they'll leave different. Outside, 5 men had surrounded the front clearing. The sheriff wasn't among them, but the drunk rancher was. The one who had once called her a limping waste of whiskey. She saw his face and didn't flinch. Look what we got here, boys, the rancher called. Runaway bride and her redskin lover. Nora stepped forward, rifle in hand, eyes blazing. I'm no man's runaway. You married now? He spat. Ain't legal. Ain't Christian. It's sacred, she said. And that's more than you've ever been. He sneered. I paid for you. You paid for silence. I found my voice. He raised his gun. So did she. Tatsiai fired first. The rancher's horse reared and screamed. A shot rang wild. One rider fell. Then chaos. Gunfire cracked through the trees. Nora ducked behind the woodpile, heart slamming against her ribs. Tatsiai moved like smoke. Fast, deliberate, death in every motion. 2 more men down. 1 rider fled. The last stood frozen, gun shaking. Young. Barely a man. Nora rose from cover and walked toward him. You think this is justice? She asked. He looked at her, trembling. I just came for the money. You came for a woman's body like it was livestock. That's what they taught you. She lowered her gun. And I'm teaching you something different. Run. And remember this fire. He dropped his weapon and ran. Afterward, the silence returned like a closing door. Tatsiai sat on the step, reloading with calm hands. Nora stood beside him, dress torn at the hem, blood splattered on her sleeve, not her own. Neither spoke. Then she laughed, quiet, incredulous, full of something half-wild. We lived, she said. For now, he answered. She sat beside him. I don't care if the snow returns, or the law, or your ghosts are mine. I'm not leaving. I know, he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. And now, she said, I believe in things that grow again. Later, she planted her first seed in the thawed ground beside the door. Not because she expected it to rise, but because something in her already had. Let me tell you something. There are stories buried in this land, under stone, under silence, under snow. But every once in a while one rises. Root first. Reaching. This one isn't about bullets or laws or bloodlines. It's about a fire that stayed lit. A voice that returned. A girl no one wanted, and the man who saw her before she even saw herself. They didn't need papers. Or rings. Or permission. They just needed one dawn where the world was quiet enough to hear truth spoken aloud. He married her before that sun rose. And she said yes, not because he saved her, but because he didn't ask her to be anything but herself. So if you ever find yourself cold and cast out, crawling from a past that tried to bury you, look toward the east. The fire's still burning, and someone is waiting.